Welcome back to Direct Station, where politics are in retrograde. I am Kate Carey. Y'all, are you ready for this? On the 4th of July, as America celebrated its birthday, and tragedies struck Texas without adequate warning or rescue, while the home of the brave and the land of the free dropped criminals off in South Sudan, one of the capitals of torture, death, and disappearance in this world. And a one-party government signed the largest domestic police force in global history into law. Neptune, the planet of illusions and dreams, quietly stationed retrograde in the skyland of Aries for the first time in 165 years. As a result of this little quirk in our solar system, 3 days later, on July 7th, the Department of Justice tried to, no big deal, quietly release a little memo that attempted to put one of MAGA's foundational conspiracy theories to bed. And within 72 hours, we watched the entire delusional shell that held the Trump base together begin to crack wide open from the inside out. I hope you have some tea or some popcorn, because we do not have much satisfaction in this national nightmare, and this week we get some. If this is your first time listening, hi, and thanks for trying. Here's how it works. You tolerate a little more astrology than you might in your day-to-day life, and I provide a new way to look at what we're living through. My job is to make it accessible, make you feel like it might matter just the littlest bit, provide a little hope and a little literary and historical context for what we are experiencing. The sequence goes like this. 1, we do the news, nothing new probably, but brief, and my take on it, which might be slightly more je ne sais quoi than what you'll get elsewhere. 2, the planets, where they were and why it matters, just a small sampling of them, not a dissertation, just like 5 minutes, a mini lesson, if you will. Then 3, the historical relationship between events such as these and planetary arrangements similar to what we've got cooking. That's the surprising and fun part when we look at the correlations in history. And then 4, the meaning making. What's it all mean, man? And then 5, the literary context, what great minds have said about this sort of thing in the past and how we can learn from it, how we can lean into that wisdom. And then 6, what do we do with it? In reflection, in practice, in action. And 7, we close with a poem for inspiration, because oughtn't we? Cool, right? So come on, try it. You might like it. The news is gloomy, but there is hope in the sky. Okay, so for this week, I do want to just pause momentarily and give a brief content warning that this episode will, for obvious reasons, include references to sexual abuse and sexual violence and sex trafficking. So just know that I am a survivor, so I will do it with as much love and care as possible, but that is what we're going to talk about today. Or part of what we're going to talk about today, I should say. For years, certain people, including the president himself, his FBI director, and his deputy FBI director, bolstered their fame and their political identity around the idea that Jeffrey Epstein, a white-collar pimp mogul, kept a client list of powerful pedophiles that included only demonized Democratic power players, and that this administration, if voted in, would finally expose that left-wing global cabal of sex offenders. The thought of the conspiracy animated the MAGA movement in ways that those outside of it, I think, have failed to understand. Everyone from Alex Jones to Steve Bannon to J.D. Vance to Megyn Kelly have spent years obsessed with this case and the secrets buried within it. There was a general assumption that once in office, the second Trump administration would reveal this information. The frenzy peaked when 2 of the leading theorists on the conspiracy, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, were appointed to be the number 1 and number 2 at the FBI somehow. These 2, Bongino in particular, have built quite a following with the gossip and drama about the idea that there was a client list, a black book, of famous, of course, liberal Johns, the global elite, in fact, who could be exposed. Kash Patel, the FBI director, had built his entire reputation on promising to expose deep state secrets. You'll notice, of course, that this circus decentered and ignored the actual young women in this case, who were in fact children when Epstein and his collaborators seduced, manipulated, subjugated, and violated them as part of a corrupt pretzel of lies, money, sex, and celebrity. Okay, so the drama around the supposed big reveal of the client list and the truth about who killed Epstein in prison while Trump was in office, I might add, and Bill Barr ran the Justice Department. This has been an artery in MAGA discourse lo these many years. And when this crowd of lunatics who had made a living and a name off of the hype came into power, they said early and often, oh, it's coming. My favorite moment of these, I think, is when Pam Bondi, the now Attorney General, was asked if she had the client list. And she said, yeah, it's on my desk. And there's a bunch of really bad stuff in there. Now, you and I both know that any FBI investigation that lasted a decade and probably includes tens of thousands of pages of information includes names of powerful people who were interviewed or loosely affiliated with this story. And you and I are comfortable with the idea that these people are going to populate the full political spectrum. I, personally, am anti-sex trafficking, anti-rapist, and anti-exploitation of teenage girls, regardless of the perpetrator's role in political or cultural life, right? But something happened in this narrative within MAGA wherein there arose an assumption that the bad guys, as bad guys are all liberal, all part of the evil left in the country. Or the world even. So that's been a big part of the illusion that was promoted here. The left was hiding it because the bad guys involved were all lefties, and the heroes in red hats were going to reveal the truth. Okay, so let's look at the sequence of events on the ground this week. On July 7th, after years of hype and months of breadcrumbs and promises, the Department of Justice quietly released a 2-page memo on a weekend, which is an age-old practice in Washington. If you don't want people talking about it, release it on the weekend, right? After what they called an exhaustive review of Jeffrey Epstein's evidence, the unsigned, somehow, memo concluded no client list exists, no evidence of blackmail operations, Epstein died by suicide, 10 hours of surveillance video confirmed it, case closed. Literally, I'm quoting. Now, this might sound like boring government bureaucracy, or to those of us who assume there's more to the story, typical everyday obfuscation of an executive branch high on its own immune power supply. But you have to understand, this memo did not just contradict conspiracy theory. It struck at the heart of the foundational mythology that had held the MAGA movement together for years. The foundational mythology that brought this man into power, the dream, the illusion, right? That the global elite will victimize and abscond with their women, their girls, their children. And that Trump, the messy, imperfect fool king who could bring about their rise to power to defeat finally evil, this has been an illusion that has held the movement in a trance. The reaction was immediate and volcanic. By July 8th, during a cabinet meeting, a reporter asked Trump about it. Trump's response was explosive. Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein, he asked. This guy's been talked about for years, he said. I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this. He called it a desecration, and he seemed genuinely annoyed that anybody was still talking about it. Within hours, the MAGA civil war began. Elon Musk, who had sparked the urgency in the discourse during his spat with the president a few weeks earlier by saying that Trump was in the files, accused the administration of a cover-up. Tucker Carlson, who needs no introduction, questioned their integrity. Laura Loomer, a far-right gossip influencer who somehow has the president's ear, still went full conspiracy mode about the Trump administration itself. And then my favorite, I think, was our friend Andrew Schultz's reaction on his podcast on July 12th. We've talked about this guy before. He's the one who had Mayor Pete on. And he had this lovely, free-ranging, totally reasonable discussion with Pete about gays in the military, about affordable housing, the environment even. So Schultz, a key player in that Manosphere podcast plane that assisted in Trump's election, who had hosted Trump and helped him win younger male voters, watched the footage of Trump dismissing the Epstein question and said, "So we're stupid? We're the fucking idiots, guys. Guys, just to let you know, we're wasting time. It's insulting our intelligence. Obviously, the intelligence community is trying to cover it up. Obviously, the Trump administration is trying to cover it up. So we're idiots, I guess. There's only two possible reasons for this, right?" And by that, he meant either they're covering it up or they hyped it up in the first place. The comedian spent 25 minutes of his podcast wearing a literal tinfoil hat. I assume as a prop. I don't know why he had it on. Positioning himself as someone who believes there was indeed a conspiracy, just not the one being dismissed by the administration. But the real drama was happening inside the administration itself. On the 10th and then the 11th, FBI Director Dan Bongino had a massive clash with the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, at the White House over their handling of the Epstein files. 4 different sources told Axios that Bongino took a day off from work after the confrontation and told people he was considering resigning. It occurs to me that the man believed what he was saying and has either discovered it was hype or discovered the role Trump had and or his friends had in the project. Either way, it seems like his brain is breaking, along with the powerful alchemy of the spell that's been holding this bizarre coalition together. The cognitive dissonance is wild. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about the planets. You do not have to learn who's who. You only need to hang in at a deep enough level to hear the archetypal story that I'm telling. You don't even have to memorize proper nouns. Let me just tell you about the planets that matter most to this story, the roles they tend to play in history. And it'll be cool, I promise. I'm not trying to change your belief system. I'm just trying to add a variable to your understanding of what we're living through, okay? So on July 4th, while the world was melting in Texas, and the signing of the Big Beautiful Bill was happening, while armed masked bands of marauding ICE agents were sweeping through a public park in Los Angeles like a pack of stormtroopers, literally. Independence Day, right? So on that day, when the consequences of this world-changing administration was on full display, Neptune, the planet of delusion, of dream, of fantasy, of lies, of faith, of spirit, and of boundarylessness, stationed retrograde, meaning stood still, preparing to go backwards in the sky, in the skyland of Aries, which is the skyland of war, of action and aggression. This is Neptune's first retrograde in Aries in 165 years. And astrologers have long understood that Neptune retrogrades, when Neptune looks from Earth like it's going backwards, they tend to, get this, strip away illusions and force truths to surface, even when that truth is painful, and almost always when that truth is unwelcome. And so, just 3 days after Neptune stationed retrograde on Friday, on Sunday, suddenly, these very same authority figures were forced to debunk their own conspiracy theories, or rather, my guess is they attempted a total reset of the cover-up to protect their president and or his friends. The structure that held the delusion together showed the first significant signs of collapse under the weight of Neptune's truth-revealing retrograde motion. Let's get really specific about what Neptune retrograde actually does, because this is not some vague mystical concept. This is a well-documented astrological pattern with clear historical correlations. Neptune retrogrades generally affect internalized fears and anxieties by stripping away illusions or dreams or false realities that have clouded our vision. When Neptune goes retrograde, it is said that the veil between the worlds becomes thinner and truth is revealed. And we know well that when fantasy worlds crash or end and harsh realities we previously sought to avoid become conscious, well, that's uncomfortable for everybody. But here's what makes this Neptune retrograde so particularly potent. It's in the skyland that we're talking about. This is Neptune's first station retrograde in Aries in 165 years. Prior to this time, Neptune, Mr. Dream, Mr. Information, Mr. Deception, has been dissolving boundaries and creating illusions in the dreamy waters of the Pisces skyland, where dreams tend to take hold of the collective. Since 2011, it's been there. Think about that. 2011 to 2025. Think about how much we've escaped into our phones, our streaming services, social media, echo chambers, conspiracy theories, QAnon, rabbit holes, right? But now Neptune, having recently moved into fiery Aries skyland territory, the sign of action, direct action, pioneering truth. Well, we knew shit was going to change. We just didn't know when or how. And the retrograde station has allowed us to begin to understand how this thing might eventually really unravel. When Neptune stations retrograde at the very threshold of Aries, it creates this perfect storm where Piscean illusions are dissolving while Arian truth-telling energy is just beginning to emerge. It's like we're being forced awake from a really intense dream. Disorienting sometimes, right? Like you wake up after a big dream and you're like, wait, where am I? Sometimes brutal, right? Like you weren't ready for what's about to happen, but ultimately it's very clarifying. The astrology is quite specific about this process. When the planet of subconscious realms backspins, we are no longer swept away by grand illusion as we now have the opportunity to cut through the haze and gain deeper insight. This is when truth rises to the surface. And for those willing to face it, it can spark significant transformation. This pattern of Neptune retrograde forcing internal contradictions to the surface has happened before. And when we look at the historical correlations, they are stunning. Let's walk through a few of them. Sorry, these are not Neptune and Aries retrograde stories. They are Neptune retrograde stories in other skylands, but they are really relevant. In 1973 and 74, we watched the Watergate conspiracy unravel because of not because of external pressure, but because the internal contradictions became unsustainable. At the beginning of a Neptune retrograde, just like the beginning of ours, the smoking gun tape that destroyed Nixon's presidency was revealed during a Neptune retrograde, forcing truth-telling that came from within the administration itself, right? During another Neptune retrograde in 1971, the beginning of it, again, not in Aries, different skyland, but the beginning of a Neptune retrograde, the Pentagon Papers were published and exploded the truth, the corruption and the lies behind the Vietnam War, brought it into public consciousness. Again, it was not internal investigators who exposed this scandal. It was an internal whistleblower, a documentarian who revealed the administration's own research into the war. Its strategists, its analysts, that brought down the whole operation. During the Neptune retrograde in 1954, the country watched McCarthyism collapse overnight, not because of external opposition. Do you remember why? But because Joseph McCarthy's own televised hearings revealed him to be unhinged and cruel, right? So in the exact same way that the social media empires came into the administration in 2025 with the earnest intention of revealing this truth, right? McCarthy with the earnest intention of revealing the truth about un-American activities, right? And he's broadcasting it just the way Bongino and Patel and Bondi have done on Fox, right? But now we've got McCarthy setting up all these television cameras in his hearings. And you've got this famous moment when Joseph Welch asks McCarthy, "Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you no sense of decency?" This happened, I swear to God, at the beginning of a Neptune retrograde. And the spell of McCarthyism broke that day. The pattern is clear. Neptune retrograde does not just reveal truth from the outside, it forces those empowered to reveal their own contradictions, to debunk their own lies through the very vehicles they use to try to show their perverse truth, right? The Pentagon Papers were an effort to document a war about which the Secretary of Defense felt righteously defensive. So he had somebody write it all down for history. And that very act reveals the bullshit, right? It's unbelievable. So these delusions are ultimately unsustainable, and Neptune's retrograde shows it. What we witnessed in the last week is this pattern happening perfectly, but with a distinctly modern twist, right? A twist that is rooted and grounded in the medium of the moment. Schultz's and Tucker Carlson's public reactions and shocked disappointment about their side represent something we haven't seen before. A public figure in real time processing that cognitive dissonance of having their political identity built on lies. When Schultz said, "Oh, so we're stupid? We're the fucking idiots, guys," he wasn't just expressing personal frustration. He was articulating the experience of millions of people who have built their worldview around a theory that was suddenly being debunked or dismissed by the very authority figures who had promoted them. This is Neptune retrograde in action. The comedian and the commentator who had staked his reputation on supporting Trump is confronting the reality that he has been deceived, right? This podcaster thought he was being politically savvy, and it's been revealed to him in real time that he's been politically naive. And this man has the fucking grace to acknowledge and process that publicly in real time. The whole influencer ecosystem has promoted Epstein conspiracies, and it's suddenly faced with the uncomfortable truth that they've been selling their audiences a fantasy. I mean, Tucker Carlson, who deserves his own documentary podcast series. On the other hand, I think yesterday it took the thing to a new level with something that involved Epstein being an Israeli spy. I haven't looked into it too deeply. That's a whole other episode. But here's what gives me hope about this moment. Schultz's reaction wasn't to double down on the conspiracy or to attack the messenger. Instead, he turns his anger towards the authority figures who had lied to him. He said, obviously, the Trump administration is trying to cover this up, positioning himself as someone who still believes in accountability, but recognizing that he's been looking in the wrong direction. Throughout history, when Neptune retrogrades force these internal contradictions to the surface, it often vindicates the voices that were dismissed or marginalized, right? During Watergate, it vindicates the journalists who have been called conspiracy theorists. During Vietnam, it vindicates the whistleblower who had been attacked as a traitor. During the end of McCarthyism, it vindicates the civil rights advocates who had been labeled as communist frickin' sympathizers. In the case of Epstein, Neptune retrograde is vindicating the survivors who have been telling their truth for years, while conspiracy theorists were chasing fantasies. Women like Virginia Roberts Guffrey, who testified in court about her experiences. Sarah Ransom, who wrote extensively about Epstein's trafficking operation. Maria Farmer, who tried to report Epstein to authorities in the 90s and was ignored. And of course, their scribe and truth teller, reporter Julie Brown. These women have been the real truth tellers all along. They didn't need a secret client list to prove that Epstein was a trafficker. They lived it. They didn't need conspiracy theories to prove that powerful men enabled his abuse. They named names and faced legal consequences for doing so. They didn't need political saviors to expose the truth. They exposed it themselves at their own peril, with the help of a female journalist at great personal cost. Neptune retrograde is finally clearing away the conspiracy noise so we can hear what survivors have been saying all along. The real work isn't about exposing secret lists or taking down shadowy cabals. The real work is about believing survivors, supporting their healing, and building systems that prevent exploitation in the first fucking place by holding perpetrators accountable consistently, no matter who they are, no matter what their politics are, and no matter who's running the country. In fact, there's a cool little detail I want to tell you about that, in my opinion, bodes well for our future here. So please tolerate just one more astro detail because it's really quite lovely. It's about this asteroid called Nessus. During this entire period, this week, Nessus, who I swear to God tends to show up at important angles for revelations of sexual abuse, trafficking, and cycles of harm. I'm not making this up. You can look it up. NESSUS. She was conjunct the North Node, the collective North Node, which is, I want to remind you that the North and South nodes are mathematical points in the sky that represent the places where the sun's arc and the moon's arc intersect. They're mathematical things that are real in the sky, and they move depending on where we are in time. And collectively, the entire North Node for the planet, which tends to point towards where we're headed as a collective, right? It's called the Node of Destiny, right? So that destiny point for the week prior to Neptune's retrograde station, up until through the moment of its station. What I mean by that is, as Neptune, the planet of the collective delusion, went into this retrograde pattern where truths tend to be revealed, while he's doing that, the asteroid that is about revealing truths about sexual harm was exactly conjunct our collective node of destiny. So the point in the sky that marks the direction we are all collectively heading was conjunct an asteroid that signifies revelations of harm. They're still very close together. That North Node and Nessus, they're only 2 degrees apart now. But don't you think that's wild? Nessus in mythology was a centaur who betrayed trust and committed sexual violence. In astrology, Nessus represents sexual abuse, trafficking, cycles of harm, and the complex web of power dynamics that enable exploitation of the less vulnerable. It often shows up prominently in the chart in the charts during times when sexual abuse scandals become public knowledge. Like when I see Nessus in somebody's chart, an individual's chart at a critical placement, I'm like, oh, you played the truth teller in your family. Or, oh, there was a truth teller in this part of your life. Some truth was revealed either by you or about you or near you that is about sexual harm. And the person's always like, why do you know that? Well, because it's written there, right? Nessus conjunct the North Node means our collective karmic assignment that is written, our evolutionary destiny as a society is directly connected to confronting sexual abuse and trafficking truths. The North Node represents where we're going, and it's saying, you must face these Nessus themes. You must hear the voices of our survivors. You must stop getting distracted by conspiracy fantasies and focus on the real work of addressing sexual abuse and exploitation. So while conspiracy theorists were obsessing over imaginary client lists, we were all missing the damn point. The point is the harm. And Nessus sat on the North Node as this shit was being unmasked. I mean, come on. That's beautiful. That's profound. The North Node represents our evolutionary edge, right? Where we're meant to grow, where we're learning to integrate our karmic assignment as a society. When Nessus is conjunct the North Node, it means our collective destiny is directly connected to confronting sexual harm. So the cosmic timing is unbelievable. Neptune retrograde strips away the conspiracy illusions exactly as Nessus conjunct the North Node says, focus on the survivors and the real work. The planets are literally redirecting our collective attention from fantasy to truth, from conspiracy to compassion. It will not kick in like today, right? But the signs are there, and the truth is real. It matters, and it is rising. Here's what gives me genuine hope about this moment, my friends. We are not just watching random political chaos. We are witnessing a cosmic pattern that has historically led to breakthrough, awakening, and collective healing. But here's the thing about these historical patterns. When Neptune retrograde forces internal contradictions to surface, it usually signals that the delusion is already dying. The fact that Andrew Schultz, a key Trump supporter, is calling himself an idiot in public for believing the lies suggests that the shell has already cracked beyond repair. When conspiracy promoters like Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson are turning on the Trump administration over Epstein, when Dan Bongino is considering resigning because he can't handle the cognitive dissonance, when the very people who built their careers on promoting these theories are being forced to debunk them, that's not the sign of a strong movement. That's the sign of the beginning of death throes of a collective delusion. The Nessus North Node conjunction is giving us a clear roadmap for what comes next. Our destiny is not about exposing secret cabals or waiting for political saviors to reveal hidden truths. Our destiny is about centering survivors, supporting healing, supporting the healing in ourselves, and building systems that prevent harm. This means shifting our attention from conspiracy theories and even us-them contests into it means supporting organizations that do direct legal aid for victims instead of following internet sleuths. It means listening to the women who have been telling their truth for years instead of waiting for some dramatic revelation that may never come. The North Node in the skyline of Pisces specifically calls us towards a greater compassion, a spiritual awareness, and the recognition of our fundamental interconnectedness. It is asking us to understand that sexual abuse and trafficking are not abstract political issues. They are human realities that require human responses. When we center survivors instead of conspiracy, when we focus on healing instead of hidden truths, when we build support systems instead of tearing down imaginary networks, that's when we're aligned with our highest collective potential. Every time in history when Neptune retrograde has forced these kinds of truth reckonings, it has ultimately led to greater consciousness for the country and a collective healing of some kind. After Watergate, we got stronger oversight of presidential power, right? After the Pentagon Papers, we got a better understanding of how the war really worked. After McCarthyism, we got the civil rights movement gaining momentum, for Christ's sake. The breakdown of delusions creates space for like a breakthrough consciousness. When people can no longer maintain their fantasy worlds, they are forced to engage with the reality that we all share. And that reality includes both the painful truth of how much harm has been done and the hopeful truth of how much healing is possible. I believe we're at one of those breakthrough moments right now, with everything that I am. The Epstein conspiracy theory serves a psychological function. It lets people feel like they're fighting evil without actually having to do the hard work of addressing real exploitation. But Neptune retrograde is stripping away that comfortable distance and forcing us to face the reality that sexual abuse and trafficking happen in our communities, involve people we know, and require our direct action to address. Here's what I think the planets are asking of us during this truth-revealing time. It's asking us to practice discernment between fantasy and reality. It's asking us to notice when we're drawn to conspiracy theories that make us feel special for having secret knowledge versus engaging with documented facts that require uncomfortable action. And hell, asking us to notice when we feel superior to people who believe in them or concern themselves with the details of them. Neptune is powerful. Collective delusion is powerful. And if you think you're bigger or smarter than that, you are confused. The cosmic weather is perfect for this kinds of consciousness building work. Neptune retrograde creates space for spiritual growth by stripping away illusions. The Nessus North Node conjunction gives us a clear focus for our collective healing work. In a book called Stiffed, The Betrayal of the American Man, Susan Faludi, you remember her, of Backlash fame? Sorry, sometimes you guys are going to have to deal with the fact that I was once a women's studies major. Anyway, Faludi's got this incredible and wildly prescient book from '99, in which she wrote something we can use to consider that healing road ahead. She says, as men struggle to free themselves from their crisis, their task is not, in the end, to figure out how to be masculine. Rather, their masculinity lies in figuring out how to be human. The men who worked at the Long Beach Naval Shipyard, where I spent many months, didn't go there and learn their crafts as riggers, welders, and boilermakers to be masculine. They were seeking something worthwhile to do. Their sense of their own manhood flowed out of their utility in society, not the other way around. And so, with the mystery of men's non-rebellion comes the glimmer of an opening, a chance for men to forge a rebellion commensurate with women's, and in the course of it, to create a new paradigm for human progress that will open doors for both sexes. That was and continues to be feminism's dream to create a freer, more humane world. It will remain a dream without the strength and courage of men who are today faced with a historic opportunity to learn to wage a battle against no enemy, to own a frontier of human liberty, to act in the service of a brotherhood that includes us all. Yes, she's writing in a gender binary, but I think her words work in 2025 anyway. Okay, so in that spirit, what the hell do we do now? Where does this beginning of the end of the Great Delusion leave us? What can we actually do with this cosmic information and political reality? First, I can recommend an action. This week, while we do enjoy the schadenfreude of this shift in the power structure, find one organization that's led by survivors and doing direct work to address trafficking or sexual harm. Maybe that's RAIN, the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Maybe it's a local organization supporting survivors in your community. Maybe it's Polaris Project, which operates the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The point isn't to donate money you don't have or to commit to more than you can sustain. The point is to shift your attention from fantasy to reality, from conspiracy to compassion, from understanding that so much of our country has been waiting for someone else to save the day, to continue to lean into the idea of taking direct action ourselves. Sexual harm has become this idea that rallies people, right? Think about the role of Lincoln Riley, the young woman who was raped and killed by an immigrant, who was leveraged and used so explosively and to such great effect by the Trump campaign to demonize immigrants and to create a narrative about the sexually violent danger of immigrants, right? So Lincoln Riley, I think is her name. And so that narrative, that idea, that like grandiose idea of the threat of harm, of sexualized harm to women and children has become this motivating force in our country. But what if the way it makes us all feel so strongly became a motivating factor towards our own behavior, towards our own action, towards our own defense, protection, and care for women and children? Just an idea. Second, I offer a practice. Neptune retrograde is perfect for developing better discernment between truth and fiction, fact and fantasy. Andrew Schultz's moment of realizing he'd been deceived is painful, but it's beautiful. This young man is modeling something really important for all of us that not many of us do, right? He is not tribal. He is a rational actor, and he has just come to he has just come to in public and was unafraid about it. many of us need to have our own version of that reckoning, that fearlessness and that humility, right? And that grace, acknowledging that we've been drawn to something because it made us feel special or informed or righteous, rather than because it was immediately useful or beneficial or even real. The way in which he faced that epiphany was a practice that I want to try to emulate this week. What would it feel like for us to sit calmly while we notice the fragility of our own assumptions, our own attachments? In your daily practice, take a moment to notice the dream that you are a part of. Just observe it. Notice its shape, its size, its color, its sound, the effect it has on you. And third, I invite you to a reflection, either something to write about or to talk about with someone with whom you feel safe. The Nessus North Node conjunction is asking us to consider our collective assignment around sexual harm and truth, and honoring what's been taken from you, from your loved ones, from your community, in your own sphere of influence, your family, your workplace. How can you contribute to creating safer spaces for survivors to speak their truth? And if you are a survivor, as I am, how much compassion are you holding for yourself and all that you've lived through in this life? The cosmic weather is creating perfect conditions for this kind of consciousness. Neptune retrograde strips away illusions so we can see clearly. The Nessus North Node conjunction gives us a clear focus for our healing work. And the approaching Saturn-Neptune conjunction will help us build lasting structures that support survivors rather than perpetuating cycles of harm. Remember, the breakdown of conspiracy delusions is not a loss, it is an opportunity. It's not a win for us who weren't in that particular one either. When we can stop chasing fantasy saviors and secret revelations, or stop hating our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, for doing so, we become available for the real work of healing, of justice, of collective transformation. And that work, ultimately, is much more powerful than any conspiracy theory or the joy of judging conspiracy theorists could be. I close today with a poem by Audre Lorde. You may have noticed that I bring her up a lot. She is, it's not obvious, my favorite, and it's my podcast, so I reserve the right to bring her in often. This is an excerpt from her poem, A Litany for Survival. And when the sun rises, we are afraid. It might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid. It might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. Almost nothing needs to be said to follow that. The cosmic timing of this moment, Neptune retrograde beginning exactly as America celebrated independence, followed immediately by truth that shattered collective illusions, feels like a profound invitation for us all. We are being called to declare independence from fantasy thinking and conspiracy entertainment. We are being invited to align our attention and our energy with the real truth tellers who have been speaking all along. The planets do not determine our destiny, but they do reveal the currents we are swimming in. Right now, those currents are perfect for stripping away illusions, centering survivor voices, and building collective consciousness around one of our most urgent healing assignments. If you would like to understand how these patterns are affecting you personally, it would be my great honor to look into it with you. I offer readings and coaching that help you navigate your unique relationship with these transformational energies and these powerful assignments. My email is in the episode description. Please write a review. Please share the podcast with people you love or people you think might be curious about it, even if they think astrology is dumb. Until next time, remember that truth does not need conspiracy theories to be powerful. Survivors don't need secret lists to be believed, and we don't need political saviors to create the changes we want to see in the world. The real work is human work, and it starts with each of us choosing truth over fantasy, compassion over conspiracy, healing over harm. So until next time, be well, be conscious, and be kind. I'll see you soon.